All right, so in this video, we're actually going to add the code for deleting the student from the controller servlet and the database util. We'll cover steps 2 and 3 in this one video. We'll kind of just mash it all together because the code is really short for those two operations. All right, diving back into Eclipse. First off, I want to take a look at that liststudents.jsp just to get a handle on the parameters that are being passed to our controller servlet. So moving on down, we have this link that we set up to actually delete a student. That's lines 48 through 52. So note here there are two parameters that are going to our student controller servlet. We're passing over command equals delete, and then we're passing over a student ID, and that's the temp student.id. And then information is being passed over to our actual servlet. And then our servlet's going to actually read that information. So let me go ahead and open up my servlet, my student controller servlet. And let me move down to my doGet method. And here, we're actually going to add support for the delete command. So this is where we would normally read the commands. And now we need to add a new case for delete. So very similar to all the code that we've created so far. So case delete, and then I'll say delete student, pass in a request and a response, and then do a break. All right, and again, just like before, right? Eclipse will say, hey, I don't know about this method called delete student. And so we simply tell Eclipse to create that method for us. So we just hover over, they give us the options. We choose the option create method delete student. And by now we're just so used to Eclipse creating code for us, we're just really good friends now. All right, so here's the method that Eclipse just created, delete student. I'll remove the auto-generated code and I'll add a throws here. So let me move to the end of this method declaration right before the curly brace. I'll hit enter right before the curly brace to get it down to the next line with me. And then I'll say throws exception. And again, we're following the same pattern that we've used for all of our other code here in this servlet. So throws exception. And by now you know my procedure, you know my process, writing some comments here to keep me on track. So the first thing I do is read the student ID from the form data. Then I delete the student from the database. And then finally, I send the user back to the list students page. So this is my basic game plan here for the delete student method that's in this servlet. All right, rolling up my sleeves here, writing some code. So to read the student ID, I simply say request.getParameter, student ID. I assign that accordingly. Then to actually delete the student from the database, I'll make use of my student database, my student DB util, and I'll say student DB util dot delete student. And then I pass in that student ID. And again, you're used to this part of it. Send them back to the list students page. We simply say list students and we pass the request response. So we're kind of in the rhythm of how we develop applications now. And again, another part of our motion or rhythm here is that Eclipse will give us an error message saying, hey, we don't know about this method delete student in the student DB util. Well, of course, this is all new code. So again, we'll highlight it and then we'll go down and we'll choose the option create the method delete student in the student DB util. All right, so there we go. Eclipse is creating more code for us. So we're inside of student DB util right now, and there's the method that Eclipse just created for us. And what we have to do here is we actually have to add the Jdbc code to delete the student. So we'll have to write the low-level code to interact with the database. So up top, I'll set up throws exception for this method signature. Again, following the pattern that we've used before. I'll define some of my Jdbc objects up front. So I'm going to need a connection. I'll say myCon equals null. And I also need a prepared statement. I'll call it my statement, and I'll set this one to null also. And then I'll set up a try finally block. And this time I'll actually do this first as opposed to the last time. If you recall from one of the previous videos, I didn't write all the code properly and I had to go back and clean up. Got a little messy, so I'll make sure I'm on track here. So try finally up front. Now I write the comments here. So the first thing here is converting the student ID to an integer. Then we get a connection to the database. Next, we create the SQL to actually delete the student. Then we prepare the statement. We set up the params. And then finally, we execute the SQL statement. And that'll actually perform the delete on the database. And in my cleanup section here, I need to clean up those Jdbc objects that I used. All right, so this is basically the game plan here for this delete student method. Okay, so let's go ahead and dig in. So the first item of business here is converting the student ID to an int. So here I say int student ID equals, and I make use of that integer.parseInt to convert from a string to an int. Then I get a connection to the database by using myCon equals datasource.getConnection. Then we just write out the SQL for doing a delete. So here I say delete from student, where ID equals, and then we use that question mark placeholder. That's the placeholder that we use for prepared statements. Now let's go ahead and prepare the statement by saying my statement equals myCon.prepareStatement. Then I'll go ahead and set the params here by saying my statement.set int. That's the first param. So 1 comma the actual student ID. So they know which student to delete. And then, we can get busy here. So here I'll say my statement.execute, and I'll actually perform the operation on the database and actually delete the student from the database. And then finally, we just clean up our Jdbc code. So we close myCon, comma my statement. And since we didn't have a result set here, we just pass in the value of null. And that's basically it. So that's the code here for delete student. And so you've seen this pattern before, so you're probably really close at being able to write all this code yourself because we've gone through a number of iterations for this already. So making some really good progress here. Alrighty, so we can save this and go ahead and move back to our servlet. So this is our servlet code, and this is in pretty good shape for right now. So our delete student, we read the student ID, we delete the student from the database, and we send them back to the list students page. And that's basically everything involved here for deleting a student from the servlet's point of view. Okay, well, let's go ahead and run this and test it out. Oh yeah. So here, right click, run as, run on server. And great. So here's the output of our application. Let's go ahead and choose the delete link along the far right. And I'll choose it for this first student here, Maxwell Apples. So I'll click on delete. And the system's going to prompt me. This is the little JavaScript prompt. Here I'll hit cancel. And note, nothing happened on the app, which is good, right? Because we cancel that operation. But let's go ahead and really delete the person and hit OK. So now Maxwell Apples is gone. Our list refreshed, and he's no longer in our list of students. which is, wow, really good. Let's try this again. See, Mary or Andrew, let's see which one, not sure. Let's go ahead and delete Mary private. So let's go ahead and delete Mary private. We'll click delete and then we'll hit OK. And now let's delete Andrew Whitaker. And then we hit OK. So great. So we just deleted 3 students. We only have 3 left. And this looks really good. But again, let's check the database just to make sure this thing is really working. So I'll go ahead and move into MySQL, and I will move over to my database here, Web Student Tracker. I'll choose Tables. I'll right click on Student, and boom, really good. We only have 3 students in our database. So that Apples and Mary Private and Andrew Whitaker, they're gone. They're deleted. Poof, be gone. All right, so this is good stuff. I'm having too much fun here. So anyway, this works out just fine. So we wrote the code for deleting a student, and we went through it step by step. We built it all from scratch, and hopefully you have a good feel for how this process works, especially after doing it for like the 3rd or 4th time. So again, I'm happy. We've made some really good progress. You can pat yourself on the back, and good job.